FM. It's just after 20 to 11 on the 17th. And I'm delighted to say I'm joined by Marie Brett, a visual artist, and behind Yes, But Do You Care? A short film that will be played in on Downtown Club. Details to follow. Marie, you're very welcome to Dundalk FM.
Thank you, Cathal. Nice to talk with you.
Absolutely. Listen, Marie, an artist of renown, it's worth pointing out. Yes, but Do You Care is a very impassioned piece about a very, very emotive subject and very important subject affecting everybody. But before we get to that, tell me a wee bit about yourself and your history within art and some of the projects you've been involved in the past.
Sure, Cathal. As you say, I've done quite a lot of work over my career, and I suppose I mainly make audio-visual work, so film works, but also big installations and events, and often in quite unusual spaces like empty hotels or forts and places like that.
There's a social commentary to all your work, isn't there?
Exactly, you're right. I think one thing that like a thread that runs through everything is that I work collaboratively with people. So I have a socially engaged practice. So as you say, the social commentary comes from working very closely with people with lived life experience, often ones that are quite kind of difficult experiences and that aren't very spoken about. I kind of tend to work long term, so often work takes about 2 years to make, and there's a lot of behind the scenes kind of research and development and meeting kind of experts in the field and then people who've kind of lived with these difficult experiences. And then there's some form of an artistic output, and some artworks are in collections. So this piece that we're talking about is in the Irish Museum of Modern Art's collection, and other pieces are in the Arts Council's collection, which is lovely for the work, because often the work's quite ethereal. It takes a long time to make, and then it's kind of shown in galleries or in these unusual kind of locations of events. But it's nice if they're in collections, because then they kind of live on into posterity, as it were.
There's I would imagine, looking at your past work, the Last Breath, Egress, there's many pieces of that. There's a huge emotional investment in these projects.
You're so right. Yeah, they take a long time to make, and I think part of that is because, as you say, you're deep diving into very, I suppose, quite tender and quite emotional landscape and territory. And so it kind of takes, it isn't work that can be rushed. And so I've worked, as you say, with bereaved parents and with people who are at the later stages of their lives, or people who take care of kind of late stage diseases. And I've worked with people that have been trafficked and held against their will, as people would call now kind of modern day slaves. And I've worked with children who've been in care all most of their lives. So yeah, I think the landscape's very sensitive.
Yeah, and these stories are stories that need to be told and perhaps don't get told.
Yeah, I think that's a big motivation for my work, that I think the stories are often, a lot of people experience them, but they're not really spoken about openly for various reasons. And I think it's making artworks an opportunity for people to kind of consider and reflect on some of these topics, you know, in a generous way.
I would suggest that art that makes you think is the best kind of art. Isn't that? Is that a fair reflection?
I suppose that's my kind of motivating factor with the work I make, Cathal, is to kind of offer space for people to kind of just think a little bit in the broader sense.
Well, the piece we have you on in particular, Yes, But Do I Care, is the subject matter within this will affect so many people, so many families. It explores dementia care, autonomy and Ireland's new capacity legislation, which I think went through 2 years ago. There was adjustments to it, originally 2015. Why dementia? Why did you get pick this particular topic, Marie?
Yeah, I think everything you've said there is kind of so spot on, Cathal. And the reason I came to make this work was I came at it sideways, because I made work directly with people living with a dementia a couple of years ago. It must be about 5 years ago now. And I met family carers through making that work. And I was really struck by family carers' stories. And I thought, I really must try and find a way back into connecting with them to build a work around them and with them. And I was so sort of struck by the kind of landscape they were living and what they were managing and what they were coping with, that I felt, I was really motivated. So I kind of spent a couple of years, I suppose, building partnerships and asking people would they be interested, and then seeking funding to work directly with family carers, and as you say, particularly people who are living and caring for a loved one who's living with a dementia.
Yeah, we have in this country, and I'm sure it's further afield as well, where carers in all their fields, be it dementia, be it whatever the caring situation is, it's taken a burden off the government, and by that then the government seem to be just accepting this rather than supporting it. It's nearly, well, we don't have to deal with that, which is a horrendous thing to feel. And I would find that they're nearly forgotten people. They've taken so much pressure off the National Health Service, that our own National Health Service, HSE, that that they're completely forgotten about.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And I think also when you're caring for a person, and often in difficult circumstances, you're not really able to then advocate and to kind of campaign and ask for kind of changes. You're often day to day, I think, and you're doing the very best you can, often under kind of difficult circumstances. So I suppose advocacy groups are kind of really, really important, and maybe carers can come back round in later years when their circumstances have changed and kind of try and ask for change and campaign for change. So I suppose I think being an artist and having a way to express some of these challenges. They're kind of societal challenges and kind of humanitarian challenges. It's a way for us all to kind of just stop and think for a little while, isn't it?
Yeah, we sometimes forget, if we are sitting in a rosy situation, we forget about those that haven't got that privilege and luck. The piece, the short film that you have put together, as you mentioned at the top of the interview, Marie, you're a collaborative artist. Philip Connaughton, who is a choreographer and dancer. Tell me a wee bit about him and how he integrates into the piece you've created.
Yeah, so Philip's an amazing dancer and a choreographer, as you say, and he's the central character that moves through both a really big old house and then open parklands. And he symbolises the carer, and he moves with an amazing kind of ability of grace and emotion through these different spaces as a thread all the way through the film. And some people, when they've seen the film, say they can see the cared for and the carer both in his kind of character. He's got.
How do you write that? How do you do that?
I suppose what Philip and myself did was I spent a lot of time with different family carers through the Dementia Carers Campaign Network and heard stories, and then wrote narratives and wrote poetry with the different carers, and then shared with Philip all these different clusters of experiences and stories and happenings. And he then began to develop that in movement. So I suppose essentially a lot of my work's about emotion and lived experience, and he could translate that with his skill into his body. So instead of it being all language-based, which a big part of the film is as well through sound, it's also very visually, it's kind of stunning how he translates the stories into movement.
The imagery is powerful.
Exactly, yeah. And it's very tender and evocative and very humanising, but very powerful at the same time, yeah.
Yeah, and it's also worked out now that this is done in conjunction with Dementia Carers Campaign Network, legal and advocacy experts as well, and so it's coming from a practical place as well as an emotional place.
Yeah, and that's so important for me, Cathal, in the sense of it being very much lived experience and it being people's real life stories. So all the narrative and all the conversations and all the storytelling embedded in the film are all real life, and they're kind of linked in with the capacity legislation. And I suppose for me, as an artist, that collaboration and the Dementia Carers Campaign Network are supported by the Alzheimer's Society of Ireland. So it's the kind of bed in the ethics and the sensitivity of the work, as well as the artistic kind of challenge of making the work. For me, it's really important that the ethics and as you were calling it, the practicalities and the social dynamics of a project are really kind of taken care of as well. So I always look to partner with a strong, reputable organisation that can honour the collaboration from their perspective. So it's a kind of triangle almost, if that makes sense, between myself, the organisation, and then the family carers in this case.
Yeah, I can imagine, and the pleasure and the working with yourself is huge for them as well. We've mentioned the assisted decision making, the Capacity Act 2015, and then the changes in 2023. What have you, with your interaction with these organisations and carers, what has been the biggest problem, biggest source of anxiety that they have exhibited to you?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and it's very complex. And I think it's fair to say that the capacity legislation, it's fantastic. It's very progressive, and it's great in many ways. I think some of the complexity is because when you shift the kind of will, and I suppose you're looking at shifting from best interests of a person living with dementia to their will and preference. And so, in terms of moving away, some would say, from a kind of paternalistic view, there's tensions that arise there, I think, that can be seen, and we kind of try and explore in the film, in the sense of when someone's intellectual capacity is kind of shifting, which it is with someone living with a dementia, then their will and preference, it can be very complicated as to whether their will and preference to, say, for example, go out into the midnight air when it's cold and raining, but wanting to go outside and kind of feel that kind of cold air on your chin, which we would do. We'd make that decision, wouldn't we? We'd decide whether we wanted to go out in the midnight air.
We have the capacity.
Someone caring for someone whose capacity is kind of slipping might feel, that isn't the best thing to do. I better lock the door, and I want to look after you. I don't want you to get cold and kind of potentially get poorly. And that might be then seen through, legislative eyes as withholding someone's right to have their own will and preference. So, that it's very complicated and very nuanced, I think, in terms of when people are living with a family carer, taking care of them in a home setting.
Like legislation, unfortunately, legislation has to look at both sides, and where the vast, overwhelming majority of carers have the best interest of the patient in mind, the person living with dementia, there is a small percentage of people who will use it as a means of not such honest means.
And this is where I suppose it gets really complicated, in the sense of trying to do your very best and looking after someone, often in quite an isolated way, and the difficulty of one day somebody potentially feeling fine to an outer world, and other days less so. How you grapple and manage with that if your kind of, I suppose, everyday reality as a carer isn't really known, that gets very complex, I think.
Yeah.
So I suppose that the film is trying to create a conversation between the carer and the legislation. And so it kind of tries to reveal some of this complexity, because although, like you say, Cathal, phenomenal amounts of people are kind of caring for others at home, it's not really that spoken about, and particularly not in terms of how the legislation might be affecting family carers. So it's to find a way for us all to just kind of reflect and think a little bit about this, and to take away, not that one would want to take away from the person living with the dementia, but that the law and the legislation are very much 100% focused on a person whose capacity is shifting, but maybe to just take away the focus for one moment from that person and put the focus on the carer, because as many hundreds of people say, thousands in effect, if you look online, say, both people live with the disease, both people are affected. There's a kind of reciprocity between the carer and the cared for.
Yeah, no, it is, and it's affecting so many people. We currently have, I think, 64,000 people living with dementia in Ireland, and the worrying statistic, and we've interviewed people from Alzheimer's Society of Ireland many times here on this show, and I keep rehashing this statistic as well, and you kindly have sent it through to us as well in advance of this interview, that 64,000 people living with dementia is expected to rise to over 150,000. That's over 150,000 in just 20 years, 2045. And that's figures taken from the HSE. That's not plucked out of the sky. And the legislative changes are designed to try and cope with that. But that is an epidemic of increase. I'm not exaggerating, am I, Marie?
No, I think you're right. And as you say, they're very held figures that they're declared through the HSE. And I think what's maybe interesting for us all to think about is the amount of people that perhaps are undiagnosed that are being supported in kind of home care situations but for varying reasons are undiagnosed. So I'd propose that the numbers are far higher than those, because they're the numbers of people that have actually received a diagnosis. And so I think it's, even more profoundly affecting.
And it's down to carers within the family, and that people are caring for these, but maybe a father or a mother are being cared for by a son or daughter at home, and they haven't gone through the system, as you rightly pointed out. So it's taking the pressure off the government, and the government should be stepping in this field.
Yeah, I think there's opportunity for far more support and far more help. And both the kind of philosophical, support, but also the very practical support in terms of, all the things that a carer kind of encounters and needs support with. Because then at that point, as many of the people that I kind of work with, they're putting out fires by the stage that they're actually kind of caring for. So I suppose in terms of support's being available in early stages. And I suppose there's also, a social kind of commentary here in terms of stigma and people feeling, frightened or concerned about coming forward for aid and help and advice early on. And they, I think a lot of carers kind of just manage quietly behind closed doors. And so there's the kind of practical supports, but there's also, I suppose, a societal shift in terms of, this is...
The stigma's gone.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly, Cathal.
The expenses that carers incur, mortgages don't go away, the groceries don't go into the shelves themselves, yet they're giving themselves. Some of them have to work during the day to pay these bills. The help should be coming, and we speak to politicians all the time here as well, and this is an issue I think, to be fair, everybody has an earnest attempt to try and solve. The figures don't lie, the figures are real, they're coming from a source that are fully verifiable, so it is something that we should maybe look a wee bit harder at. Marie, before I let you go, because I want to give the details of when it's happening, where it's happening, how people can get 2 years in the works, basing on what you were telling us earlier, 2 years in the works, this piece.
That's right, and it's a very short piece. It's in terms of as a film, but an awful lot of work kind of behind the scenes, and a lot of partnerships and a lot of contribution, a lot of collaboration. And I suppose it's a chance for people to come and find out a little bit more, like we've been talking about, but also to sit and immerse in. It's beautifully shot, so it's in a very evocative and kind of human, moving piece. And there's also a couple of speakers, so I'll be chatting with Sarah Daly, the Creative Spark Director, and also Colm Mullen, who's the Loud International Film Festival Director. Will be there kind of giving his take on the film as well. And we really welcome kind of people to come, whether they're at early stages of caring or know someone who's caring or just interested in it as an art piece and in terms of working with people and sharing people's stories, to kind of come and spend the time with us. And we're always open to kind of conversation afterwards as well.
It's happening on the 19th, which is Wednesday at 4 p.m. In the downtown hub of Creative Spark. Do people need to book?
No, people can just turn up and you can kind of come a little bit before 4 p.m. and we'll have refreshments as well. So no need to book. Everyone's kind of very welcome to just drop by. And
I just want to reiterate, if you don't have anybody, you're not involved in dementia care, you can go just out of interest in the art piece and maybe in dementia care and what it's showing in your piece.
Exactly, and I think, the art piece is in the Irish Museum of Modern Arts collection, so it's kind of, it's of interest as an art piece as well as its kind of topics within it as well. And everyone, as you say, is very welcome. I think it's important we kind of offer opportunities to kind of see the work. The work's touring nationally. I got a grant from the Arts Council, and I was just really keen to bring it out into different communities and different settings, and hope that people might be interested to come and see the work and the conversations around it. Cathal.
Well, listen, it's a pleasure talking to you, Marie, and we've run out of time because it's 11 o'clock. I have to go to the news, but But I have a piece, a local singer-songwriter, Finian, has released. It came out on the 14th. We had it a couple of weeks ahead of it. Remember My Name, and it is a beautiful, beautiful piece of music. And it tells the story of someone living with a partner, experienced and dealing with the slow fading memory, all effects of dementia. And I'll be playing that after the 11 o'clock news. But make sure, if you've got time, 4 o'clock on Wednesday, go down and have a look at Marie's piece. That's Marie Barrett. A pleasure talking to you, Marie. Yes, but Do You Care is happening then. Appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you, Carl. Likewise.
No problem.
On 97.7 FM and online. This is Dundalk FM News on the Hour.